I still remember the smell of disinfectant in that hospital room, sharp, cold, and oddly comforting. The machines beeped softly beside my husband's bed, and I sat there, my hand resting over his. His skin felt clammy, but his pulse was strong. He was alive. Only a week earlier, the doctors had told us that his kidneys were failing fast. Without a transplant, he had less than a year, and in that moment, I didn't even hesitate. The test showed I was a match, and before I could blink, I had agreed to give him one of mine. People said it was brave. But to me, it wasn't bravery, it was love. When you've shared 13 years with someone, when you've seen them laugh, cry, and dream beside you, giving up a piece of yourself doesn't feel like a sacrifice. It feels natural. When he woke up after surgery, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. "You saved my life," he whispered. I smiled through my own pain and said, "That's what wives do." At that moment, I believed we'd grown closer than ever. The first few months after the transplant were difficult. I was weaker than I expected, constantly tired, my body trying to adjust. But every time I struggled to get out of bed or winced from the stitches, I told myself it was worth it. He would bring me soup, adjust my pillows, even hold my hand while I walked around the house for exercise. "We'll get through this together," he said once, pressing his lips to my forehead. I believed him. But as the months passed, I noticed small changes. His phone started buzzing at odd hours, and he would step outside to take calls. When I asked, he brushed it off with, "Just work stuff." He began staying late at the office. Deadlines, he said, though his job had never been the kind to require late nights. And then there were the smells. Unfamiliar perfume clinging to his shirt, traces of lipstick on coffee mugs that weren't mine. My heart told me something was wrong, but my mind refused to accept it. After everything we'd been through, after giving him part of my body, how could he betray me? One evening, I gathered my courage and asked him directly, "Is there someone else?" He froze for a moment, then sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Why would you even say that?" "Because you're different," I whispered. "You barely talk to me anymore." He laughed, a hollow, cold laugh that made my stomach twist. "You're imagining things. You've been emotional lately, maybe because of the surgery." That night, I cried myself to sleep beside the man who'd become a stranger. Weeks later, I found the truth in the simplest way. I was cleaning the living room when his phone buzzed. A message flashed on the screen. "Can't wait to see you tonight." My hand trembled as I opened the message thread. There it was, months of texts, pictures, and promises. Her name was Claire, a co-worker from his office. He'd been cheating on me even while I was recovering from the surgery. I sat on the couch for nearly an hour, unable to breathe, unable to cry. The betrayal was too large to fit inside my chest. The man I'd nearly died for had replaced me before my stitches had even healed. When he came home that night, I was sitting at the dining table with his phone in front of me. "Who's Claire?" I asked quietly, his face drained of color. "You went through my phone? That's what you're worried about?" I snapped, my voice shaking. "Not that I found out you've been sleeping with another woman?" He didn't deny it. He just sat down and said flatly, "It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," I said. "You betrayed me," he sighed. "Look, I didn't mean for it to happen. But things haven't been the same between us for a long time. I feel trapped." "Trapped?" I repeated, stunned. "Trapped in the life I helped you live? Trapped in the body I kept alive with my kidney?" He looked away. "Please don't make this dramatic." My heart broke in silence. That night, I packed a small bag and went to stay with my sister. Days turned into weeks. He called, sent messages, even showed up once at my sister's door, begging to talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him for coffee. He sat there, looking nervous, stirring his drink without taking a sip. "I didn't come to fight," he began. "I came to be honest." "Honest?" I repeated. "Now you want to be honest?" He nodded. "I've been thinking a lot, and I want a divorce." For a second I thought I'd misheard. "You what?" He looked at me, guilt in his eyes, but no love. "I think it's for the best, for both of us." I stared at him. The man who had begged me for my kidney, who had promised forever, and all I could manage was a small, bitter smile. "Okay," I said quietly. "If that's what you want." He blinked. "That's it?" "Yes," I said, standing up. That's it. And as I walked out of that cafe, I realized something. He might have taken a piece of my body, but he would never take the rest of my life. The day I signed the divorce papers, the sky was painfully bright. The kind of brightness that makes your eyes water, or maybe that was just me holding back tears. He sat across from me in the lawyer's office, looking calm, collected, even relieved. I wondered if he remembered the hospital, the nights I stayed awake watching over him, the pain that still pulsed in my side from the surgery. The lawyer slid the papers toward me. I looked down at them, black ink on white paper, and realized this was it. 13 years, gone with a signature. My hand shook as I picked up the pen. I wanted to scream, to throw those papers in his face and demand he feel even a fraction of the pain he caused. But instead I smiled, a quiet, controlled smile that came from a place even deeper than heartbreak. Without a word, I signed my name. When I handed the pen back, he looked at me, confused. Maybe he expected drama, a breakdown, begging, but I had none left to give. "Goodbye," I said softly, and just like that, the man who'd once promised forever became a stranger with my kidney. The first week after the divorce was the hardest. I'd moved into a small apartment, 1 bedroom, 1 living room, just enough for me. The silence was deafening. I'd wake up at 6 a.m., still expecting to make coffee for 2. I'd turn my head in bed expecting his side to be warm, but there was no one. Just me. My body still hurt, the surgery scar pulling whenever I stretched or laughed too hard. Some nights, I pressed my palm over it and whispered to myself, "You survived worse." I had to remind myself that I hadn't just lost a husband, I'd lost my sense of self. I'd built my life around his needs, his dreams, his comfort. I'd forgotten who I was outside of being his wife. Now, it was time to find her again. I started small. I painted my walls pale yellow. The color he used to say was too bright. I bought a set of floral curtains he would have hated. I filled the space with plants, music, and the smell of vanilla candles. And slowly, I began to heal. I took long walks every morning, breathing in the city air, feeling my body strengthen. I began journaling, writing everything I'd been too afraid to say aloud. Some days my entries were filled with anger, others with hope. Then one evening, as I sat on the balcony sipping tea, I realized something. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone to come home. The peace was strange, but it felt good. It wasn't long before I went back to work. I'd left my job years ago because he didn't like the idea of me being around other men at the office. "You don't need to work," he'd said. "I'll take care of you." What a cruel joke that turned out to be. I applied for a position at a local marketing firm, and to my surprise, they hired me. The first few weeks were tough, learning new systems, catching up with years of change, but I was good at it. Better than I remembered. My boss, an older woman named Marilyn, saw something in me. "You've got grit," she told me one afternoon. And heart. Don't lose that. Her words stuck with me. Bit by bit, I began to rebuild. One afternoon, a delivery came to the office. Flowers, white lilies, my favorite. I frowned at the note. "You deserve happiness." "I'm sorry, no signature." But I didn't need one. I knew his handwriting. For a moment, my chest tightened. A part of me still wanted to believe he meant it. But then I remembered all the times I'd begged him to love me, all the nights he'd lied. I picked up the bouquet, walked outside, and placed it in the trash. That simple act felt like closing a door that had been left open too long. Weeks turned into months. Life began to make sense again. I learned to cook just for myself, dishes that made me happy. I joined a weekend pottery class and made new friends. I started dressing differently too, not to impress anyone but to express myself. Bright colors, bold earrings, messy buns. I wasn't the same woman who had walked into that hospital a year ago. I was lighter, freer. One night, I looked at myself in the mirror and whispered, "You made it." But fate wasn't done testing me yet. One Sunday morning, while grocery shopping, I saw him. He was standing near the fruit section, holding a basket. For a second, I thought I was imagining it, that familiar slouch, the same nervous habit of tapping his fingers against his thigh. He saw me too. Our eyes met. "Hi," he said after a pause, awkwardly. "You look—" "Good," I smiled faintly. "I am good." There was silence. He looked older, tired somehow. His eyes darted around before settling back on me. "I wanted to say sorry," he said. "For everything. For how I treated you." I nodded. "I know." He swallowed. "Claire and we didn't work out. It ended months ago." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. "I hope you find peace," I said simply. "But don't look for it in me." He blinked, maybe expecting anger, maybe forgiveness. But I had nothing left to give. Not love, not hate, just peace. As I walked away, I felt lighter than ever. That night I wrote in my journal, "I gave him life and he gave me freedom." Maybe that's the trade I needed all along. I closed the notebook and looked out at the city lights. My life wasn't perfect, not yet, but it was mine again. And that was enough. Months passed, and with each one I felt a little more alive. My mornings no longer began with silence or sadness. They started with purpose. I'd make coffee, open the windows, and let the sunlight pour in. It wasn't just light. It felt like forgiveness. I had forgiven myself for staying too long, for giving too much, for losing who I was. My scars had faded a little, but I never tried to hide them. They were proof that I'd given life twice, once to him and once to myself. At work, things were changing too. My campaigns started gaining attention. Marilyn, my boss, called me into her office one afternoon, a proud smile on her face. "You've got something special, Mia," she said. "You're not just doing the work, you're living it. You understand emotion, and that's what sells, emotion. The same thing that once broke me was now my strength." Within a few months, I was promoted to senior marketing lead. My salary doubled. I was finally standing on my own, not because someone helped me, but because I refused to give up. One evening, after work, I treated myself to dinner at a small Italian restaurant near my apartment. I sat by the window, watching the city rush by. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to join me. I was enough. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "Mia!" I turned, Joe, and there he was again. Ethan, my ex-husband. He looked different this time. Thinner, paler. The confidence he used to wear like armor was gone. "Can I sit?" he asked. I paused, then nodded slowly. "Sure." He sat across from me, fidgeting with his hands. "I heard about your promotion," he said softly. "You look happy?" "I am," I replied calmly. There was silence between us, the kind that carried years of unspoken things. He finally said, "I'm not doing well, Mia. My health's been rough. The transplant didn't hold up like the doctors expected." For a second, my heart clenched. He was still the man I once loved, still the person I gave a part of my body to. But then I remembered the cold look on his face the day he asked for the divorce. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said gently. "I really am," he sighed, rubbing his temple. "I've made mistakes, too many. I thought the grass was greener, but—" He trailed off. I leaned forward. "Ethan, the grass is greener where you water it." "You never did." His eyes lifted to mine, guilt heavy in them. Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "No, I don't hate you. But I don't love you either. I'm past that now." When I left the restaurant that night, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. He was finally facing the consequences of his choices, not because I punished him, but because life did. That's the thing about karma. It doesn't rush. It arrives exactly when it's supposed to. The next few weeks were a blur of progress and peace. I began speaking at local business events, sharing my story about resilience, healing, and starting over. People listened. Some even cried. Women came up to me afterward whispering, "Your story gave me courage to leave." Every time someone said that, I felt my pain transforming into purpose. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was inspiring. Then, one afternoon, I got a call. "Hi, this is Dr. Patel," the voice said. "We're calling regarding Ethan Collins. You're listed as his emergency contact." My heart skipped. I hadn't realized he'd never changed it. He's been admitted. Kidney failure complications. He's stable, but he asked to see you. I froze. Every rational part of me said, "Don't go." But something inside whispered, "Closure." So I went. When I entered the hospital room, it felt like déjà vu. The same beeping machines, the same sterile smell, the same man lying pale against white sheets. But this time I was standing, and he was the one broken. He looked up at me weakly. "You came." I did. He smiled faintly. "You always do." I didn't answer. I just stood there, watching him struggle to find words. "Mia, I don't expect forgiveness," he whispered. "But I need you to know you were the best thing that ever happened to me." I was too blind to see it. I swallowed hard. "Ethan, I forgave you long ago. Not for you, for me." Tears slipped from his eyes. "You gave me life. I gave you pain. I don't know how to live with that." "You don't need to," I said softly. "Just make peace with it. That's all anyone can do." He closed his eyes and nodded. "You're stronger than I ever was." I smiled sadly. I had to be. When I walked out of that hospital, I didn't look back. That chapter of my life had ended, completely, beautifully. A year later, I stood on a stage holding a microphone, speaking to an audience of over 200 women. The banner behind me read, "Rebuilding after betrayal, finding strength in the broken places." I told them my story, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. "Sometimes," I said, "life takes everything from you so it can give you yourself back." The crowd erupted in applause. In that moment, I felt every wound, every tear, every lonely night turn into power. Later that evening, as I sat in my car, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "I saw your talk online. You were incredible. I'm proud of you." I stared at it for a long time, then smiled and deleted it. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need his approval anymore. I'd finally learned the most important truth. The best revenge isn't anger or payback. It's peace. And peace was exactly what I had. That night, I went home, lit a candle, and looked out the window. The city lights shimmered like promises, new beginnings, untold stories, a life I built from ashes. My heart was whole again. And this time, it only beat for me. A year passed, and life had become soft again. Not easy, but peaceful. The bakery next to my apartment had learned my coffee order by heart. The barista smiled whenever I walked in. "Double espresso, extra foam, right?" I'd smile back. "You know me too well." That's the thing about peace. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, like morning sunlight sneaking through the curtains. I had started my own small marketing agency, Mira Creative, helping local women-led businesses build their brands. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who was once too scared to sign divorce papers was now signing client contracts with confidence. One day, during a business networking event, I met someone new. His name was Noah. He wasn't loud or flashy like Ethan had been. He was quiet, patient, and when he looked at me, it felt like he saw me. Not the scars, not the past, but the woman standing right there. We met for coffee the next week. "I read your story online," he said. "The one about your husband and the transplant." "It was powerful," I smiled nervously. "I didn't expect people to care that much." "People care," he said softly, "because you remind them it's possible to lose everything and still rise." That line stayed with me. Lose everything and still rise. Maybe that was my story's real ending, or maybe it was the beginning of a new one. Over the next few months, Noah and I grew closer. We didn't rush. He knew about my past, the betrayal, the pain, the scars that still sometimes ached on rainy nights. But he never tried to fix me. He just stood beside me, quietly holding space for my healing. One evening, we walked through the city park. The sky was pink and gold, leaves falling around us. "I used to think love was supposed to be dramatic," I said, watching the sunset. He smiled. "Maybe it's supposed to be gentle instead." I turned to look at him, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt since before Ethan: safety. Meanwhile, news about Ethan reached me occasionally. Mrs. Peterson from the old neighborhood messaged me one day. "Your ex-husband isn't doing so well. He's living alone, mostly quiet now." I read the message and just nodded to myself. I didn't feel anger or pity, just closure. We had both chosen our paths, and life had taught us what we needed to learn. I whispered to myself, "You reap what you water." A few months later, I received a letter in the mail from the hospital. It was a donor update form. Ethan had listed my name as the person to be notified in case of medical emergencies. For a moment, I considered removing my name, but then I smiled and set the paper aside. That part of my story didn't need rewriting anymore. It just needed peace. Noah and I spent weekends cooking together, laughing at how bad he was at flipping pancakes. He'd sprinkle flour on my nose just to make me laugh. "You're terrible at this," I'd tease him. "And yet," he'd grin, "you still eat what I make." It was simple. It was real. And it was enough. One morning, I was invited to speak again, this time at a women's empowerment summit. As I stood backstage, microphone in hand, my heart raced. But when I walked on stage, the applause washed over me like warmth. "Good morning," I said, smiling at the crowd. "My name is Mia Collins. A few years ago, I gave my husband my kidney, and then he gave me divorce papers. But today, I want to tell you that losing him wasn't the end of my story. It was the start of me." The audience went silent. Every face watched me. I continued, my voice steady. "When you lose everything, you discover what you're really made of. Pain doesn't destroy you, it reveals you. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. And sometimes, walking away is the most powerful thing you'll ever do." When I finished, the room erupted. Women stood, clapping and cheering. Some had tears in their eyes. At that moment, I realized something profound. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a survivor, a creator, a woman reborn. Later, after the event, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous, clutching a small notebook. "Miss Collins," she said, "my boyfriend cheated on me last month. I thought my life was over, but after hearing you speak, I think I can start again." I hugged her tightly. "You already have," I whispered. As she walked away, I looked up at the sky and thought, maybe that's why it all happened. Maybe my pain had a purpose. That night, Noah and I sat on my apartment balcony, watching the city lights shimmer. He handed me a small box. "What's this?" I asked. "Just open it." Inside was a simple silver ring. Not flashy, not expensive, but elegant. "I don't want to replace your past," he said softly. "I just want to build your future. Together." Tears welled in my eyes. I didn't answer with words. I leaned forward and kissed him, slow and certain. A year later, we opened a joint foundation called Second Chances, helping single women start small businesses after divorce or betrayal. Each time I handed out a grant, I remembered the woman I used to be, broken, scared, bleeding in every way that mattered. Now that woman was helping others rise. Sometimes, late at night, I'd open my old journal, the one I used during the hospital days. On one of the pages, I had written, "He took my kidney. He took my love. But he will never take my will to live." I smiled and closed it. Because now I wasn't surviving out of spite. I was living out of joy. I stood in front of the mirror one morning, tying my hair. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who begged her husband to stay. She was wiser, calmer, and finally whole. And for the first time in a long time, I whispered to my reflection, "Thank you for not giving up." When I stepped outside, the sun hit my face just right, warm, golden, forgiving. I walked down the street hand in hand with Noah. And I knew, no matter what life had taken from me, it had given me something even greater in return, myself. It's strange how silence feels after surviving a storm. There was a time when I feared quiet moments. They reminded me of hospital rooms, arguments, and broken promises. But now silence feels sacred. It's peace wearing a soft disguise. Every morning, I make my tea, open the curtains, and watch the sunlight fill the room. No more phone buzzing with Ethan's demands. No more waiting for someone who only remembered me when he needed something. It's just me, my peace, and my new chapter. The foundation Noah and I built, Second Chances, started small, but it grew faster than either of us expected. Women from all over the city came forward with dreams they had once buried. There was Clara, who started her catering business after her husband left her for her best friend. There was Maya, who used to cry in her car after work but now owns her own beauty salon. Each of them carried scars, but those scars glowed like proof of survival. Every time one of them shared her story, I saw pieces of myself. We weren't victims. We were builders, fighters, survivors who learned that broken doesn't mean finished. One afternoon, after a long day of mentoring, I sat on the balcony with Noah. The city lights shimmered below, and I leaned my head against his shoulder. "You know what's funny?" I said quietly. He looked at me with that calm smile I loved. "What?" I thought Ethan taking my kidney and leaving me was the worst thing that could happen. But if he hadn't done that, I never would have built this life. Noah brushed a strand of hair from my face. "Sometimes the universe breaks us just enough to let the light in," I smiled. He always knew the right thing to say. Months passed, and our foundation hit its 1-year anniversary. We organized a gala event to celebrate the women who had turned their pain into power. The hall glowed with soft lights, laughter, and the smell of fresh flowers. I stood on the stage, looking at all the faces, brave women who refused to let betrayal define them. "Tonight," I began, "we celebrate not just success, but survival. Every woman in this room has turned heartbreak into hope. And if anyone tells you that you're too broken to rise again, show them how wrong they are." The applause was thunderous. Tears filled my eyes, but this time they were tears of pride, not pain. After the event, I received a letter, an old-fashioned, handwritten one. The envelope had Ethan's handwriting. For a moment, my heart skipped, not from love, but from memory. Inside, his words were brief. "Mia, I saw an article about you and your foundation. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to say, you were always stronger than me. I hope you find every happiness I couldn't give." I folded the letter gently and placed it in my drawer. No anger, no tears, just a quiet, grateful smile. Because I already had that happiness, and it had nothing to do with him. Years later, I stood in my garden, the sound of children's laughter echoing through the yard. Noah was teaching his niece how to ride a bike, and I was baking, the smell of cinnamon and sugar filling the air. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. It was real, honest, and finally, peaceful. I often thought about how my story started with loss, a kidney, a marriage, a dream. But maybe sometimes losing everything isn't the end. Maybe it's the universe's way of clearing space for something better. That night, as the stars shimmered above, Noah wrapped his arm around me. "Do you ever think about the past?" he asked softly. "Sometimes," I said. "But only to remember how far I've come," he smiled, kissed my forehead and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Mia." And as the night wind carried the scent of jasmine through the air, I finally whispered the words I once thought I'd never say again. "So am I." Months rolled by, and life began to find a fragile rhythm. Mia woke up early, brewed her coffee, and went to her job at the local library. She smiled at strangers now, spoke to people without fear, and sometimes even laughed, a sound that used to echo only in memories. Then one rainy evening, while she was closing the library, she heard the bell over the door jingle. She turned, expecting another late reader. Instead, Ethan stood there. Her breath froze. He looked thinner, his once confident posture replaced with nervous hesitation. "Mia," he said softly, "you look..." "Good," she didn't answer. She just watched the raindrops sliding down the glass behind him, wondering why the sight of him didn't hurt anymore. "What do you want, Ethan?" she asked finally. "I made a mistake," he said. "I was angry, confused. After the surgery, I wasn't myself." Mia let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "You took my kidney, Ethan. You took my love, my trust, and then you threw them both away." He flinched but stepped closer. "I know, but I need your help again." Her stomach twisted. "Help?" he sighed. "My other kidney's failing. The transplant. It's not working as well as doctors hoped. I'm on the waiting list, but it could take years." For a moment, silence filled the room except for the hum of rain. Finally, Mia whispered, "You came back to ask me for another organ?" "No," he said quickly. I thought you might help me raise funds or..." Mia shook her head slowly. "Ethan, I don't hate you anymore, but I don't owe you anything." She walked to the door and held it open. "Goodbye." He stood there, drenched in regret and rainwater, before walking out. The next week, Mia couldn't stop thinking about him, not because she wanted him back, but because of how easily she let him go. That was her closure. She realized that real power isn't in revenge, it's in peace. But fate wasn't done yet. 2 weeks later, her friend Clara burst into her house, clutching her phone. "Mia, turn on the news." Mia did. The headline read, "Local businessman Ethan Wright arrested for medical fraud and manipulation." The reporter explained that Ethan had been forging medical documents to jump ahead on the transplant list. Using Mia's name and medical history to qualify early, her knees nearly gave out. "He used my records?" "Yes," Clara said. "The police said he might have tried to sell the match to another patient if it worked." Mia sat in silence. Then slowly she smiled, not out of joy, but final understanding. He hadn't just broken her heart, he had destroyed his own soul. A few months later, Mia received a letter from the correctional facility. She hesitated, then opened it. "Mia, I know I deserve this. I'm sorry, not because I got caught, but because you were right about everything. I kept taking from you even when you had nothing left to give. I hope someday you can forget my name, if not forgive me, Ethan." Mia folded the letter and slipped it into a box with her hospital bracelet, the divorce papers, and a single photo from their wedding, the only memories she hadn't burned. Then she walked outside, stood beneath the sunrise and whispered, "Goodbye, Ethan." For the first time, it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like freedom. Spring came softly that year. The trees outside Mia's window blossomed like they hadn't in years, and she felt, almost for the first time, what peace really meant. She had stopped checking Ethan's name online, stopped replaying the betrayals in her mind. Instead, she poured her energy into something new, a small charity that helped single parents pay medical bills. It started with one fundraiser post on social media. By the end of the month, she'd raised enough to cover a child's kidney treatment. When she visited the hospital to deliver the check, the boy's mother hugged her and whispered, "You saved him." Mia smiled. If only she knew what saving really cost. That night, Mia sat by her window with a cup of tea and a notebook full of ideas. She wasn't writing about Ethan anymore. She was writing about resilience, about starting over, about the quiet strength that blooms after heartbreak. Her posts began to gain attention. Messages poured in from people saying, "I went through the same thing. You gave me courage to leave. I thought I'd never heal until I saw your video." For the first time in her life, Mia felt her pain had a purpose. She was turning scars into stories, and those stories were helping others survive theirs. Weeks passed. One evening, she received a letter from the state hospital. Ethan's condition had worsened. He was on dialysis and had listed her as an emergency contact. She stared at the paper for a long time. Then quietly, she folded it and placed it in a drawer. No anger, no pity, just a full stop. Later, when her therapist asked how she felt, Mia said, "I don't want revenge. I just want my peace to stay mine." As her charity grew, local news invited her for an interview. The reporter asked, "Mia, people say your kindness saved lives even after your own was almost destroyed. How do you stay so compassionate?" Mia paused, then answered simply, "Because pain doesn't have to end with pain. Sometimes it becomes light." The segment went viral overnight. Within weeks, donors flooded her inbox. A foundation offered partnership. For every dollar that came in, Mia felt a small piece of her heart rebuild itself. One morning, as she walked into the hospital to visit one of her charity patients, a nurse called her name. "Mia Wright?" She turned. "There's something you should know," the nurse said gently. "Ethan passed away last night. Kidney failure complications. He asked us to give you this." The nurse handed her a small, sealed envelope. Mia stepped outside, sat on a bench under a blooming cherry tree, and opened it. Months drifted by. Yet the silence between Mia and Ethan remained absolute. She hadn't seen him since the day he signed the hospital discharge papers. Then one evening, an envelope arrived, ivory, embossed with his neat handwriting. "Dinner? One last conversation before we both move on." Mia read the line again and again. Her fingers trembled, not from anger this time, but from curiosity. Why now? Why her? Against her better judgment, she went. The restaurant glowed with warm candlelight. Ethan looked different, thinner, quieter, and far less sure of himself. He stood up as she entered, guilt flickering across his face like a storm cloud. "Mia, you look healthy." "I am," she said, calm but distant. "Kidneys tend to help with that." He winced at the jab. Then he sighed. "I know I don't deserve your time, but there's something I need to say." Mia sat, folding her arms. "Make it quick," Ethan's voice cracked. "I made the worst mistake of my life. When I asked for the divorce, I thought I was freeing us both. But now I see I was just running from guilt from myself. You gave me life, and I repaid you with betrayal." Her heart clenched, but she kept her composure. "You think an apology erases what you did?" "No," he whispered. "But maybe the truth will." He explained that the woman he'd left her for had walked out within months. The guilt had eaten away at him until his health started to fail again. The doctors said stress. Mia said karma. "I'm not here for revenge," she told him. "I'm here to end the story properly." "What does that mean?" "It means closure." She rose, leaving him stunned. Before walking away, she placed an envelope on the table, his medical bills, all paid in full. "You don't owe me anything now," she said softly. "We're finally even." Outside, the night air felt crisp and alive. For the first time in years, Mia felt light, untethered. She walked home beneath the glow of street lamps, her heart steady, her breathing easy. She didn't need his remorse to heal. She already had. That night, she opened her journal, the one she had started after surgery, and wrote, "Forgiveness isn't for them. It's for the part of you that still bleeds." 6 months after that final dinner, Mia's world looked completely different. The little flower shop she had opened downtown was now thriving. People loved the way she arranged colors, how every bouquet seemed to tell a story. Her customers didn't know that each stem represented a piece of her healing. She had built this new life quietly, without fanfare, without Ethan. But the world had its own way of circling back. One autumn morning, as she was setting up vases outside the shop, a familiar voice called her name. She turned, startled. Ethan stood there, shoulders hunched, eyes rimmed red. He looked as if life had been slowly draining out of him. In his hand, he held a small paper bag from the pharmacy. "Mia," he said, his voice trembling. I didn't know where else to go." Her first instinct was to walk away, but something, perhaps habit, perhaps compassion, kept her rooted. "What happened?" He gave a bitter laugh. "Karma, I guess. The transplant's failing. They say I might need dialysis." Mia's chest tightened. A part of her wanted to feel pity. Another part whispered that this was the universe balancing the scales. But above it all was exhaustion. "You should talk to your doctor," she said quietly. "I have," he answered. "They told me I might need another donor. But don't worry," he added, seeing the flicker of alarm in her eyes. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I just needed to see you, to tell you I finally understand what you gave me and what I threw away." Mia didn't respond right away. She looked past him to the morning crowd, strangers passing by with coffees and hurried steps. For the first time, she felt entirely detached from the chaos that had once consumed her life. "Ethan," she said finally, "I don't hate you anymore. But I can't keep being the person who saves you. I already gave you one life." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "And I wasted it." She took a deep breath. "Then maybe this time don't waste your own." There was nothing else to say. She stepped back into her shop, leaving him standing on the sidewalk, framed by the morning light. That evening, as she closed up, her assistant, Clara, found her staring at the last bouquet of the day, a mix of lilies and white roses. "They're beautiful," Clara said softly. "Special order?" Mia smiled faintly. "No, just something I needed to finish." She placed the bouquet in a clear glass vase, tied it with a silver ribbon, and set it on the windowsill where the moonlight could touch it. That night, she dreamed of the sea, the same image she had seen while recovering in the hospital. Only this time, the waves were calm, the water gentle, and the horizon endless. When she awoke, she felt no anger, no sadness, only peace. She wrote her final journal entry. I used to think love was giving until it hurt. Now I know real love is letting go before it destroys you. And with that, Mia finally closed the book. A full year passed. The flower shop was now more than a business. It was Mia's heartbeat. Locals called it the Second Bloom. She had chosen the name after realizing that life could start again, even after being torn apart. Every morning, she'd unlock the doors, breathe in the scent of fresh lilies, and feel grateful for ordinary days. No hospital beeps, no legal papers, no begging for someone's affection, just sunlight, petals, and peace. One rainy afternoon, she received a small envelope. No return address, just her name written in shaky handwriting. She opened it carefully. Inside was a note that read, "Thank you for the life you gave me. I couldn't fix what I broke, but I finally learned to live honestly. I hope you found happiness. Ethan." A single teardrop smudged the ink. She folded the note and placed it in her journal beside her old hospital wristband. Then she whispered, almost like a prayer, "I already forgave you." That weekend, Daniel, the neighbor who often helped her with deliveries, stopped by holding a cup of coffee. He smiled shyly. "You work too much, Mia. Come on, the park looks beautiful after the rain." She hesitated, then laughed softly. "You're right. Maybe it's time I breathe outside the shop for once." They walked together under gray clouds and blooming trees. He told her about his plans to open a small photography studio. She shared stories of her first days running the bakery with Ethan before everything changed. But instead of pain, she felt something light, like fresh air after a long storm. When they reached the fountain, Daniel snapped a quick photo of her without asking. Mia blinked, surprised. "Hey!" "I wasn't ready," he grinned. "Exactly. That's the point. You're finally not pretending anymore." She looked at him, then at the rippling water. For the first time in years, she saw her reflection smiling, not the forced kind she used for customers, but a real one. It wasn't the smile of a victim or a survivor. It was the smile of a woman who had rebuilt herself from ashes. That night, Mia placed Daniel's photo on her bedside table. The caption she wrote on the back said, "Life after loss is still life. It just grows differently." She turned off the light and whispered into the quiet, "I'm ready for my second bloom." YouTube outro. Did this story touch your heart? Would you have forgiven Ethan or walked away like Mia did? Tell me in the comments. I read every one of them. If you believe that healing starts with courage, give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs hope today. Don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-life stories that remind us even broken hearts can bloom again. With love and respect, see you in the next story.